As far as cross-curricular goes, I have not prioritised that yet, I say yet, in my classrooms. For year 10, 11 and 12, it's really, really easy to put a theatre style in. So year 10, my school likes to do Japanese no theatre. I think they like that because there's a lot on it. I would love to teach the corroboree or some Indigenous performance, but there's not a lot of different resources accessible to actually teach that. So I think that's why Asian theatre gets more of a say. There are heaps of plays out on sustainability at the moment, and heaps of different workshops and units of work to do on sustainability. So I know that it's there, but as far as the time that I have and what I think my essential learnings are with my 7s, 8s and 9s, it hasn't fitted yet. And I'm trying to build drama up more at my school and make it a subject that kids would want to pick and that they see as important, because at the moment they don't see it as being important. They don't see all the different skills that you can learn, all the social skills that you can learn in drama. They just, I don't want to be an actor, I won't do it. So they choose it in year 8 and 9 because they don't care and they can do fun things. But when it comes to year 10, they and their parents say, that's not important, you don't need that. So I'm trying to build it up. So I suppose I have prioritised other things over than trying to implement different theatre styles into the lower year levels. But it is something that I want to do, and it's kind of a shame to say that I haven't done it. Like, it's not cool, it needs to happen, but I don't think it could have happened yet. As far as Indigenous theatre goes, I think that's really important. The school that I work at has an Indigenous community. We had 15 Indigenous kids in year 7 last year, and I think we have another 12 coming to year 7 this year. It's really important to understand, for everyone to understand the local Indigenous culture. Unfortunately, every Thursday morning there is a park near the train station where you will see the same Indigenous adults drinking alcohol, and they live the stereotype, and that's what the Anglo kids at our school see. And that's what the Indigenous kids at our school see from their relatives. But that's not what it needs to be. Because of that, I've actually used my position as Cultural Activities Coordinator, some fancy title that means I have to be in charge of the production, to implement things for our Koori kids, because they have funding. There's money there that you can use for the Koori kids on Indigenous things. So last year and this year I've already planned for many different things for those kids to do to experience their culture and to pass it on to other kids. And this year, the 7s, every year 7 and every year 8 will see a performance from an Indigenous performer. Unfortunately, I can't afford that out of the drama budget, but I found it in the year level budgets. And I asked the year level coordinators if they could pay for this. The parents of the community don't want to pay for extra performances. They won't do that. Even if it was $5 a kid, they won't do that. So I need to find it from the school's budget. And drama can't afford that, but I found other people who can. So that's my kind of way of getting out of not actually doing what I'm supposed to do with the curriculum yet.
At year 11, in the drama course, one of the units is dedicated to Australian theatre. So in our course, we look at Indigenous theatre, and in particular, actually, I'm interested in I look at the stolen generation with the year 11s, and it's really interesting actually, because most of them know nothing about it, like really nothing at all. I mean, they've heard, they have heard about it, but they really don't know anything about it, and which sort of it makes you think about what they're learning in history and English. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's definitely something missing in the curriculum in general if the kids don't really know anything about Australian history. and obviously the stolen generation is just a small part of it. I'm saying that I don't think they really know anything about Australian history. So from a drama perspective, it's really interesting because we start with a research unit on what it means, who the stolen generation is, and I think, a few years ago maybe that wouldn't have been acceptable to even do in a school. I never asked for permission. I never even thought about it. I work at a private Jewish school, and they're fine with me doing it. We actually end up putting on the production, or at least partially the production of Stolen by Jane Harrison, and the parents think it's amazing, even though we are putting it on with white Jewish kids, not with Indigenous people. Jane Harrison came to speak to the Year 11s, which was fascinating actually, because she was really interested in their experience. Like, she wanted to talk to the kids about their experience, and she tried to ask them about what their grandparents had been through in the Holocaust. And lots of the kids at my school, well, actually me included, have grandparents that went through concentration camps and things in Eastern Europe and survived. And some of their families didn't survive, obviously. And Jane wanted to talk to the kids about how the kids felt about the play Stolen and the stolen generation, and being misplaced and being treated terribly and being removed from your family and awful things happening to you. And she wanted the kids in my class to tell Jane how they related to it, because obviously they've had no real experience with any Aboriginal people or Indigenous people, except through maybe AFL football and things like that, but they don't really know. That's all they know. So it was fascinating, because their relatable experience was their school, they're like being bullied or being, treated, being not part of a cool group, or not being as smart as the smartest people or as pretty as the prettiest people, and then that connection that they found between the Holocaust and the stolen generation, which Jane found fascinating, and we talked about it, and the kids and I talked about it, and the kids were really angry that they knew nothing about the stolen generation. They felt really hard done by, that they'd never learnt anything about it in school. And they found the play so powerful, which it is. And obviously it's also, it's great, it's kind of also great fun for kids to put on, because it's full of non-naturalistic techniques, and it's got all this room for great costuming and lighting and simple stuff, but it's just terrific to work with. But they were so into the history, and they couldn't believe that they didn't know anything about it. They were annoyed that they didn't know anything about it, and we're talking about like 17 drama students that got to know something about it through that experience. But no one in the rest of the school got to know anything about it, all except for the people that came to see the show. And that was mainly their parents, who thought it was quite remarkable. But yeah, I guess so when you talk about the Australian curriculum and the things that are being brought in that have to be addressed, I mean, I don't know exactly how it's going to work, and I know people are scared of change and scared of teaching to new things, and everyone gets scared as soon as things change, and everyone gets afraid as soon as they've got jargon in front of them that they have to look at and read and go through. But I think the intention of it is good. I think the whole point is that it's supposed to embrace our multiculturalism, and it's supposed to teach the kids where we're actually from and where we are now and where we came from, and they don't get enough of it. They definitely don't, and in drama they don't. So yeah, we were kind of doing it irrespective of that, but it's going to be good when we have to focus on other things too and bring other things in that are important, because it's going to change education, and it will change drama education.
Okay, so one of the cross-curricular priorities that we particularly are focused on in drama at our school is sustainability. It just seems to feed in really nicely, and there's so much we do around sustainable practice within the arts. So at more senior year levels, we're talking about recycling and sustainable use of set, and how can you design set in really interesting ways that still makes use of the right products, or what happens to our set once we've built our big set for our VC production. What's going to happen to it? Oh, we're going to pull it apart and we're going to do something else with it, and letting them see behind the scenes what actually happens and what we want to do. Our kind of reliance on but use of technology now means that we're less paper-based, I guess, and the girls really respond to that well. So if I hand them a big thick document, they're like, oh, this must be important. It must be really important, you've printed it out, please explain. So it kind of feeds in really well with drama at all year levels, from year 7 through to 10, within the kind of national curriculum. We're looking at a whole world of different things, and different new plays are emerging that tackle really political issues. The TAME project, which is run by the Malthouse at year 9 and 10, is something we always engage with, and that's based around climate change and global warming, and it's really interesting to see the girls' response, because originally it's like, oh, painful, and then they start to realise that actually it's, that we give them a script that's not even remotely something that they would think about, and they go, oh, and you can do this and we can do that, and they really get into it. It just seems to feed in really well, content-wise, thematically, in actual practice. It just seems to kind of permeate that curriculum, whereas engagement with Indigenous culture is so much more problematic. So I look at it and I go, I'm a British white female teaching, and I'm teaching Indigenous culture. How do I even begin with that kind of topic? And how do I get an authentic voice in there, and how do we look at Indigenous artwork and in depth, something that's meaningful, not just going, oh, here's a dot painting, right, let's go and interpret. There needs to be something real and tangible there, and I find that tricky. So that's probably the one that's the most problematic. It depends on the school culture, but the engagement with Asia is a lot easier for us, because we have quite a big population of students from Asia, so they're able to bring in their own experiences and kind of rework practical assignments in really interesting ways. We just recently did one where a couple of girls who are Chinese spoke purely in Chinese throughout, and they acted everything out and spoke it in Chinese, and we had a separate section of people who came in and they interpreted what they said in kind of our speak, which was really interesting. Or we've had a whole section on language and how does language denote meaning, and some of the girls chose to speak in text speak, BTW, this, blah, 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 and then what does language do, and how do we even need language in performance to convey a message? So there's some really interesting things there, but yeah, I'd say the engagement with Indigenous, that's tricky, it's hard.
Yeah, look, the cross-curricular priorities, to be honest, I ignore most of the time. They do come up from time to time in different ways, but very rarely intentionally. the three areas that were listed on the question sheet there were Indigenous, Asian and sustainability. The Indigenous side of things tends to come up a little bit when we explore the history of drama or different styles of drama, because we're in Australia and it makes sense to look at the Aborigines and how drama is expressed in their culture. The Asian one, similar kind of thing, crops up a bit more often though, because we have a very multicultural school, and in any given drama class, at least a third of the kids are probably from an Asian background. So just talking to the kids themselves about what drama they've been a part of or experienced tends to bring up, them talking about their culture and the way things are done there. So the Asian side of things comes up a little bit there. Sustainability, honestly, I haven't touched on at all. If I did, and I guess that this would also apply with the Indigenous side of things as well, it would be, I think, without looking at it too deeply, it would be more the kind of thing that would get raised. For example, I know that both science and humanities look at environmental sustainability and that kind of stuff as topics that they explore in depth. And I would tend to use drama then as a medium to express what the kids have been learning. So they might form a point of view on a particular issue, or they might decide to, make a short play about why it's important to recycle or whatever. So I think that we would use drama as a medium rather than as a way of exploring it on its own. Same thing with the Indigenous side of things. I know that in Year 7 they look at the book The Rabbits by Sean Tam and John Marsden. And again, that brings up a lot of issues, and they have a lot of discussions and around that, land rights and Indigenous rights and that sort of stuff. And then role plays or short plays that then allow them to express their opinions on things would be a good way of sort of tying in drama with it. But again, it's not something that we've explicitly done at this stage anyway.
So I'm going to talk about how I've used the cross-curricular priority of Indigenous Australia through drama teaching. And I suppose even in the way that I started answering that question, I have this sense always of being, I'm not an Indigenous person, so how can I teach this? And even when I've gone to workshops or read books, there is this constant fear that I have that I'm misrepresenting an entire group of people. And it's not. And the other thing about Indigenous Australian as a cross-curricular priority is it's not one group of people, it's many groups of people. And so, even talking about, so one of the things that I do with my Year 7 groups is we look at the conventions of Indigenous theatre as a storytelling or theatrical conventions. But it's to be really clear that we're talking about some, not all. That these are also within the context of that I'm not an Indigenous person myself. I can only go on what I've observed and what I've learnt and through people that I've spoken to. And I suppose that the alternative is to completely ignore it, which I don't think that's something that I want to do, but it does fuel me to continue to read and to ask questions and to find better ways of doing it. We're really lucky that we have a strong Indigenous partnership program at my school, and so there are a number of boys here on scholarship, and it's one of those genuine moments where I've been able to engage students in conversation about, you're an expert in this and I'm not, is this right? And so I've learned a lot from doing that.
Because I teach my focus is in the VCE area, I tend not to be really, I read the national curriculum stuff, but I'm not particularly, I don't need to worry too much about Ausvels. I am not comfortable, and I think this is a cultural thing from the 70s political lifestyle I went through. I'm really very, very cautious of dealing with Indigenous activities when I think I may not do them correctly. Dreamtime stories, we actually had a faculty meeting yesterday afternoon, and we were looking at doing Titalik, something, the frog, and bringing that in as shadow puppets with Year 7 as an introduction. But yeah, and someone else was going to do the work on that. I'm really happy to take that on board. I'm just really wary of doing it incorrectly or being patronising. Sustainability is a huge push in our school, and in fact we were doing some work with making puppets out of newspapers last year. We do that in the junior years. We do recycling of stuff, and the kids said to us, "Miss, we're doing sustainability in English, in Chinese, in what we call learning journeys, which is a mixture of history and geography and things like that. Do we have to do it in theatre?" And I just went, yeah, because these are in the national curriculum. We don't actually look at other faculties' curriculum and syllabus. We, think we're on the cutting edge and we have to tick off boxes, but we need to actually look at other curriculum and see what other teachers are doing, because the kids will actually get overkill and then resent it. And their learning capacity will come from a place of resentment, and they won't take on board the messages we're trying to give. So I'm really careful about those areas. We have, again, a really huge Asian, because we have a campus in Nanjing, China. So that's another area that we do. I like to look at kabuki. I like to look at the movement. I like to look at the art form of the makeup. But again, you've got to be really careful. You're just not ticking boxes. And you don't do it, oh, now I've done that for 2 weeks and it's tokenistic and I brought someone in to talk about it and we've watched a couple of things on YouTube, because you haven't scratched the surface and maybe you've done it an injustice. And that's why I get a bit toey about that stuff.